Hello, folks, and welcome to episode 125 of the Noclip podcast. Danny here. If you're watching the YouTube version of this, you can see me hanging out in a random room in my parents' house. Here are some clothes that are drying. Here is a painting my mother did. Here is me drinking a can of delicious Bulmer's cider. It is 11 o'clock here in Ireland. Hopefully it's not too echoey in this room. Apologies if it is. I'm using a decent headset. I'm on vacation, but I just needed to check in with my boys over on the West Coast. Jeremy, how are you? What time is it there?
It is 12:11 in the afternoon. I feel like your audio quality is fine, but I feel like I'm gaming with you in high school or something because you're in your parents' house and on a little headset.
Yeah, I very much have I don't know what the brand is. It's Corsair. It's Corsair. Which isn't it funny? Corsair has it's a type of boat, right? And it has the boat logo on it.
How did they get that for mic peripherals?
Yeah, name another type of boat, Frank Howley.
The Titanic.
That's all right. Do you want to go again, or?
I'm trying to think of other nautical disasters. I don't know.
That's all the ones he remembers.
Duck boat. That's in Boston.
Duck boat? Hell yeah, dude.
What's a duck boat?
Duck boats you get little tours of I can't remember what the body of water is called in the Boston Common. I've never done it because it's a tourist thing.
It's a thing where it's like half of it is like you're driving around the city in like the bus, and then it goes into the water.
Yeah.
To a boat.
Oh no, that's the duck boat. I'm thinking of there's boats there's like swan boats too. We have a lot of
like pedaloos or whatever that you pedal around in.
I haven't lived in Boston in 10 years.
Think of all these boats we just thought of. Yeah, you're right, Frank.
A galleon is where I would have gone.
Galleon, that's pretty good. I like I was about to say Skibbereen, but that's a place in Ireland. There's another one that's like that. I forget the name. I love boat terminology. You know,
this is now a boat terminology podcast.
Starboard
is that starboard bow.
That is part of a boat for sure.
There, the two ship games that come to mind is Resident Evil Revelations, which is a zombie game on a cruise ship. It was like a B-side Resident Evil game they released on the 3DS. It's all right.
It was on a cruise ship.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
What was what's the other one? And then I've got a question for you, and I will see how good your gamer trivia is.
The other is Return of the Obra Dinn, which is like one of the best games ever.
Oh yeah,
of course.
Yeah.
That's a good chat. Do you remember the Resident Evil knockoff game that was also set on a boat?
Oh yeah, Cold Fear.
Cold Fear.
I gotta play that.
Yeah.
I've never played it. I want to play it.
Should we do a documentary on Cold Fear? I remember the box. Yeah, that's another classic. We're not here to talk about Cold Fear though, but we are here to talk about some Boston-related shenanigans, I guess, because Redfall came out this week. I have not played it. The day we got the codes, I was flying to Ireland, so I didn't get a go. I know Frank did, and we recorded a video that is going up on Crew. It'll be up by the time this podcast is up for sure. So you can go check that out, but I'm excited to talk to you guys about it. Also excited to say thank you to all of our incredible Battle Pass holders. James Brown, Jason Drury, Ryan Cobb, Tucker Morgan, Crimson Cyclist, Sven Hooster, Aaron L. White, Tim Robinson, Forrest Pruitt, Andy Fegan, Eric Hamilton Schneider, Cameron Ladd, George Dakotas, Jacob Godser, and Tohir Tiliaev. I have been getting postcards for these wonderful Battle Pass holders to send to them from all over Ireland. I've been picking them up in various spots around the place. So if you are a Battle Pass holder, you've probably only got another couple of days to make sure you've got the right address, so I don't send it to some random person who used to live in the apartment you were in when you first signed up to Noclip. So
and then they'll know you're a gamer if they get your postcard. You don't want that.
Or that you're being flirty with a Irish
video games documentarian
who sends vague messages on postcards.
You got to smooch. You got to put lipstick on and then smooch the postcard.
Oh yeah,
too,
like a Dear John.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a Dear Paddy or something. Dear Seamus.
Dear Sean.
Like Dear Sean. There you go. Why didn't I go for Dear Sean? It's literally John in Irish, and it's my dad's name. I don't know how I missed that one.
It's the Bulmer cider, dude. It's doing you in.
I know. I'm drinking my Bulmers here. I'm having a good time. I have. It's been a lot of, when you go home and it's a lot of like checking in on you kind of, just hang out with my brother and his kids and my sister and her kids and my parents now. But it's been a lot of fun, and we're inserting a vacation into this one. I'm going down to Kerry in the southwest, which is like basically like the sort of most beautiful part of Ireland, and I have never been there. So, and I used to live like very close by in Cork. So I'm just like a bad, like you said, a bad tourist in your hometown. I'm a bad tourist in my home country.
You never do the tourist stuff in the place you grew up. Like I didn't even know what a duck boat was 5 minutes ago, and I lived in Boston for 22 years.
My sister made me go on the one in Dublin, which is a Viking tour, but it's the same concept, but it just looks like somebody painted a longboat on the side of a. Oh, actually, I take it back. Weirdly enough, the ones that they used in Ireland, which is the same thing, it was like a car that then went in the water and did a boat part. I think the entire fleet of the 3 ones that were in Dublin, I remember it was part of the tour, were D-Day landing crafts.
No way.
Yeah, that had been like, obviously not the exact, because they'd put proper wheels and a modern motor on them or whatever, but they were like, the frames of them were those like Operation Overlord landing crafts. Isn't that crazy?
That's absolutely the Higgins boat. I literally my friend and I have a running joke that one day we're going to retire and buy a Higgins boat together. So that fills me with delight.
And I my only assumption, the only other way I was thinking that I think on the tour they said they were like legit actual ones, but the only other thing that like the other connection for D-Day in Ireland is that Saving Private Ryan, that scene was actually filmed in Wexford, which is not far from here where I am. It wasn't filmed in Normandy. It wasn't filmed in America. It was filmed in this fairly nondescript beach in Wexford, and they used to do. Because they had all locals and they had loads of Irish people who were like amputees and stuff were extras because obviously they needed them for those shots, and they had the pillboxes and all that stuff. And then I remember for years they would do like a recreation, like everyone would get together on one of the days of the Saving Private Ryan shoot years later, and then people would just turn. It slowly went from everyone's dressed as World War II characters to people are kind of dressed up as like all war characters to like then Spider-Man and Batman started turning up, and it just became like just a bunch of cosplayers on a beach.
That's Fortnite. That's the prototype for Fortnite.
It's the metaverse.
Yeah, is that the metaverse? Is this a metaverse?
Steven Spielberg's metaverse.
I also love that it's a recreation of a cinematic recreation of an actual battle. Like they're not war reenactors, they're movie reenactors.
Yeah, exactly. Do you remember that one time we were here with Tom Hanks?
Yeah.
And
remember that historical event when Tom Hanks stormed the beach?
Yeah, Ireland doesn't have much World War II. A couple of bombs landed in my hometown, but they were like Germans who missed the south of England because of fog, and then they just flew over the south because I'm in the southeast. So like a bomb got dropped on a school down the road from where I grew up,
Jesus.
But just like one, or maybe dropped it by accident.
I laughed way too early in that story because I was laughing about them missing England, and then you said they bombed a school, and I was mid laugh.
Oh, it was like at nighttime. Don't worry.
Okay. Phew.
Nobody was in there, and it was a Quaker school, so like if anyone's gonna forgive you, it's Quakers.
They were really quaking after that happened, though.
Whoa! All right, let's talk about Redfall, gents. Frank, you have delved. We're obviously big Arcane fans here. Arcane Leon, Arcane Austin. I think it's fair to say that even like Arcane fans and non-Arcane fans were sort of maybe the word is unconvinced by what Redfall was and how Redfall was going to be. I was sort of cautiously optimistic about it, and it seems like it kind of landed where I thought it would land in terms of critical expectation or whatever it was. But I've literally not played it. All I've seen is I've read about it. I've read some reviews, and I watched your guys's little look at the game that's going to hit crew. So you're a couple more hours into it. What's your general vibe of what Redfall is? And I guess with the critical and sort of large response around it in context, like is it as much of a shit show as people are kind of saying, or is there something good in there?
It's interesting. For me, it feels like playing like Borderlands or Far Cry single player, where it's like, oh, this is kind of a nice, cozy open world game that you can grind. The shooting feels good. The world feels good to play. I feel like I am not the target audience or what the game was designed to be, because I think even all the trailers is like, this is 4-player multiplayer action, kind of like a Left 4 Dead or Back 4 Blood, which is why I dismissed it. It's like, oh, those games are stressful. Coordinating that with friends, I'm good. I'll ignore it. And then I found out this is coming out to Game Pass. We got a code. I'm like, yeah, let me check this out. I started playing it. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm super into vampire. This is cool. And but immediately I noticed that things seemed simplified. Like it didn't seem complex like Prey, where it was like you have to figure stuff out, do puzzles. There's no keypads to input, so is this really an immersive sim? So it seemed kind of simplified, even more simplified than like Deathloop. It was like, okay. And then once I saw what the mission structure is, you have your fire department headquarters, you pick up missions, you pick up side missions from safe houses, then it just feels like I don't know, the traditional open world structure of like even like a Saints Row, where it's like you have 3 different neighborhoods, you do the missions here, you knock these different branches out, and I'm like, oh, this is kind of relaxing. I kind of like this. So I played it a few nights. It would be the game I'd play at the end of the night. And then reviews came out, and everyone was complaining about like bugs, like sync issues with multiplayer, and it's like, oh, I didn't experience that because I didn't try it in multiplayer at all.
Right.
And then on the Xbox version, the only like it's capped at 30 frames, which was startling at first, but you kind of get used to it. But I didn't have any hard bugs. I never had crashes. Apparently, the PC version is probably worse. So for me, this definitely lands as like a B game. Like this isn't like Resident Evil 4 or even like or Tears of the Kingdom, which I'll be excited for. It's just like, okay, this is a nice cozy game to play. And because it's on Game Pass, for me, it's like, yeah, this is cool. If I had paid $70 for this, I would be confused because this does not seem like a game that should. I don't know. Like it seems kind of like one of those middle tier like $40 like indie team games that you'd maybe get. So I don't know what the full story is there, but from my side, like, oh, I like it. I don't love it, but I dig the horror aesthetic of it. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting scenario.
Does it feel like a multiplayer game that you're playing single player? Like, you know what I mean? Does it feel like you're kind of playing it wrong or something?
Yes, because it seems very easy by the default difficulty. But which is in my head, it's like, do they ramp it up when you're in multiplayer? Are there more enemies? It doesn't seem that complicated, like in terms of combat. I'm also playing with a robot companion, so maybe like the character class I picked has a robot that can distract enemies. So I think I picked the one best suited for single player. But your skill tree, half of it is for multiplayer abilities. So you can revive teammates faster, you can heal teammates faster. So it's like, well, I'm just gonna ignore all that and then over buff my single player thing. The one thing I noticed, which I dislike and I forgot to mention, is when you press start, it doesn't pause the game universe. So it's the same thing as like Destiny or something, where it's like which is
even
weird.
In single player.
Yeah, even in single player. So it's like, oh, that's kind of and even if you die, the like mission is still going on. You have to like get back to where the objective was, and it's like, oh, so it's So so that's why I'm playing it. It's like, oh, it seems like I'm playing the game wrong, but I'm enjoying it. And am I breaking? I'm not breaking the game, but it's like, it's weird where it's like it didn't seem. And I could be wrong, but it's like it didn't seem like intentional to be playing it single player, because it seems like part of me is like, am I missing something here? Is it way better with friends? But then from what I've seen is like apparently multiplayer stuff isn't working. I'm not sure. I haven't tried it, but yeah, I'm trying to think what else like. And
yeah,
also,
I guess like is what the way you're describing it makes it sound like whenever a new Far Cry comes out, and like I couldn't really. It's almost like a podcast game. I think Jeremy, you said that in the little video we did. We got a clip look, whatever they're called, and it like it had that vibe, or like another game that was like a Game Pass. I think it was a game. Was it one of the early Game Pass games? I forget. Was Crackdown when that new one came out?
Yes.
And like Crackdown is the most just like there's nothing particularly like exciting or vibrant about Crackdown, but it's good popcorn gaming. You know what I mean? Where you're just like shoving it into your mouth, and it's good. You know, you listen to a podcast and you're just happy because you're collecting orbs and you're doing stuff. It sounds kind of like it's like if you go in with low expectations, you'll have a good time.
Yes,
if you go in expecting an arcane, polished, interesting, you know, genre breaking sort of game, you're gonna be disappointed.
Yes, it also reminds me of Rage 2 is the other one, which I think I also played on Game Pass, which is like,
I loved Rage 2.
And that's the thing where it's like,
that's not like there's nothing to write home about Rage 2, and I loved it.
I think as I played Rage 2, I listened to like Stone Cold podcast, and I was like, this is like this. I needed this vacation. This is awesome.
Yeah, right.
So it's like, but again, it's like I don't think anyone sets out to make a podcast game, because that feels like a second tier of gaming. But those games are important, and I don't know, like, so it's interesting, but like, yeah, so it is. That's why I feel like it's actually cozy to play. It's nice knocking out these open worlds. It doesn't seem like it's that long either. I don't know if you're intended to like try to level up every character, or then try harder difficulties with friends. I don't know I'll put that much time into it. I think I'll finish it once just to beat it and enjoy it. But yeah, and again, it is very simplified. Like, there's not too much gear. There's weapons that drop, but other than that, you're not worrying about like armor, which I think even the latest Far Cry did, and that kind of lost me.
Right.
So
I wonder if, because there was news last week, or I forget, was it Raph? I think might have done an interview. Raphael Colantonio, who's no longer with Arcane, did an interview. I think it was last week, or maybe it was the week before, where he was talking about, there was something to do with, I think it was him. I might be wrong, but it was about how Deathloop was originally a smaller project, that it was something that sort of turned into something. I wonder if Deathloop, if there's another Arcane game going on somewhere, that there's a game we don't know about that's getting worked on, and like Deathloop ended up being a game. Well, there's two ways this could have gone, I guess. Either Deathloop was a small project and Redfall was a kind of a small project, and then Deathloop sucked some of the resources out of Redfall for a while. And I'm saying this knowing full well that apparently Arcane Austin and Leon are now run largely as independent studios. They don't really do the hard cross collaboration they did on, say, Dishonored. Obviously, Dishonored 2 was a Leon project. Prey was an Austin project. But I do wonder if maybe some of that happened, especially with like people like Raph leaving, maybe, and I don't know, maybe the orientation, because also the CEO, I remember in France, left after we did that interview, Jeremy. So maybe during COVID as well. Maybe it makes more sense for the whole studio system if everyone's working remote anyway. Maybe it makes more sense for them to integrate a bit more. I wonder if either Deathloop pulled some resources off, or what I'm kind of thinking more so is that there's another project going on that might be between both of them. That's a bigger project, and Redfall, they almost like realized early that it was kind of, oh, that's kind of what the game is, and let's maybe not dump too much effort and resources into it and just kind of finish it and get it out. But actually there's this other project going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it does feel like, so I haven't played it myself. I just watched Frank play it for 30-40 minutes yesterday when we recorded, and it does just seem to have kind of an identity crisis or something. I've seen some of the reviews saying this as well. It feels like it's not fully committed to being a more traditional Arcane game, nor is it committed to being something more like a Ubisoft adjacent open world 'em up. It just feels, I don't know. It was very odd. It felt proof of concept-y is a word that kept popping into my head when we were playing it. I was watching Frank fight a vampire, and I was like, oh, this is when it's going to get cool, Fighting the little guys is whatever. Those are just throwaway guys. But the vampire, this is going to be the big bad, a open world, kind of like world boss event. And Frank was on a rooftop fighting him, and he just kind of backed up in a circle, and the vampire just kept swinging and missing him every time. And it was the least... It was the most anticlimactic thing I've ever seen, because it's a game about vampires, and then he finally finds this Nosferatu-looking ass vampire. And I was like, this is
been alive for like centuries.
Yeah, how did he survive for centuries when his only move is like swipe in a straight line?
Yeah, So and then I remember at the end of the video, I was just rewatching it before we came back online, and like even you were looking at the map, and it didn't look. It wasn't that. Spider-Man you mentioned, or Far Cry is another good example. It wasn't that sort of Ubisoft map where there was 10 million things on it, which I don't think anyone believes Arcane would do anyway. But also, like, I think if I was somebody who worked at Arcane and looked at the budget on their games, I think the thing that always cost the most was the levels, that they made lots of them, that they were always beautifully designed, and that creating art in the 4K world we live in, and especially with the sort of thoughtful level design that they do, that's where games went over scope perhaps, or like took a large amount of time. And we know that because Deathloop is a solution to that, because they made their game worlds and then they just changed the time of day 4 times and they modified them, right? You had your 4 or 5 areas, and that was a very intentional, like we talked to them about that. That was a very intentional way of squeezing more, artfulness out of the team without overburdening them with something like Dishonored 2, which just had a million, or Prey. I mean, I was about to call it Citadel Station. What's it called? I forget the
Talos One?
Talos one. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
Talos Principles.
That's Talos Principle exactly.
That's why I thought it was wrong, because I was like, it's not Talos.
It's a Crytek game. Yeah. So yeah, like I wonder if that was a part of it again. Like that makes it look to me like, oh, this is a smaller thing, and perhaps this is a smaller project. We can kind of get it at the door. The one part that throws me a bit is the $70 price tag on PC.
Yeah.
Where if you get bought by Microsoft and this game is going to be a Game Pass game, and you put this out and it's smaller, I think it totally works. And the way you're talking about it, it totally works. Sure, it's not the best game in the world. It's a proper 6 out of 10, 7 out of whatever it is. But hey, look, it's almost free. It's not free. I pay for Game Pass, but didn't cost me that much. Whereas, yeah, if you're charging $70 for that thing on PC and it's kind of a light touch and has busted stuff and the AI seems like not 2023 multiplayer sharp enough, that doesn't read great to me.
Yeah, I feel like it's stacking the deck so hard against the game to have the expectation that's placed upon Arcane as a studio as this kind of prestige AAA. They're AAA, but they do games that are also these pieces of art that are like these interactive worlds. And then it's also $70. And then it's just, I think so much about this when I play games that your mindset going into a game affects the experience so profoundly.
Oh, so much. Yeah.
So the game that I'm going to talk about later is a $3 game, and it's very short and small, and it's perfect because I anything I got out of that game was just frosting. Like I had a cool experience in the first 5 minutes, and my brain automatically lit up and was like, I got my $3 worth. The novelty dopamine is shooting out in my brain. Anything else from here is bonus. But when it's $70, you're every single thing where you're not having a blast, you're like, all right, that's minus $20 of value. It's like, you know what I mean?
Especially if
you
it
have to be
doesn't
economical.
work.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the biggest thing is if it's not fun, that's very subjective. If it doesn't work, that's, you can't really argue with that.
Yeah, it's unforgivable. And you're right, like in a world where, Iron Lung and Vampire Survivors exists, like how do you, that's people are so much more attuned to that, especially 70 then also like, and I'm not saying, look, interest, like we can look at how much $70 cost 20 years ago, right? And it all makes sense. And DLC and the cost of making games and the market is bigger, but blah, 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 blah. And workers' rights. And should these people get paid? All these things, right? We're not going to have that conversation now. But when it says 70 and not 60, that instantly puts even more pressure on that question. And yeah, that seems like maybe not the way to go about doing it. It's funny. It's like the Fallout 76 stuff. Expectations is such a big part of it. And if people, it's almost like Bethesda gets stung by their own image. Like they put a lot of work to present Bethesda as a company and Bethesda games as these very, important sort of like landmark tentpole games. And I think when they fall short of that, whether it be Fallout 76 or this, or even like Doom Eternal, you know what I mean? Like where the expectations are so high and maybe it doesn't quite hit it, or Rage 2 is another. I guess Rage 2 is the counterexample of when expectations are so fucking low, it's okay. But it in a way, I'm starting to see Bethesda a little bit be victims of their own image, kind of, on this sort of stuff, perhaps. And definitely Arcane with this one, because like you said, this is intent created, it seems, as less as one of those games. And who's going to begrudge them after keeping immersive sims alive, basically, on their own for like 20-something years? Like, make whatever the fuck you guys want. Like, go for it. Go for your commercial success. But yeah, if expectations are here and you didn't quite get... Like, none of us knew what Redfall was before it was coming out, right?
Yeah. Yeah, Frank and I were talking about how this game would be received if it was $40 and from a studio that people didn't have preconceived notions for, and I feel like reviews would have climbed 2 points minimum. You know what I mean? If it was the problem is that there's a mismatch between the amount of work that it takes to make a game like this and the scale of a 30 person. I mean, I wonder how big the team was on this game.
Yeah.
Because this doesn't feel like an indie game, so it's kind of it's a pipe dream to say, oh, if this was an indie game and $40, $30, people would have been more forgiving, because you can't create this game and then sell it for $30. It doesn't make financial sense.
I would love to do a follow-up at Arcane and talk about those things and be like, how many people worked on Deathloop and how many people worked on Redfall? And maybe maybe that would be an uncomfortable comparison for everyone. But Deathloop seems like a game that had more people working on. I haven't played Redfall, big caveat, but just from watching your video, I'd wonder if it was a project that at a certain point they went, we haven't really found the diamond here, so let's just take what we have. It's good enough. It's totally solid B game, and let's get it out there. And that's what happened. I don't know. It's hard to judge. That's why we do what we do at Noclip, because those are the questions. Because every game, even games that don't reach their expectation, like there's a story, there's a reason. Like they know when they're putting out what type of game they were putting out, But yeah, thanks so much, guys, for checking it out. I'm excited to play it on Game Pass. I'm a bit bummed about the frame rate stuff because I'm one of these folks who always put it on performance mode over resolution. I could not care less about resolution mode. So I kind of want to play it on PC, but I don't want to pay $70 for it. So I'll probably be playing it there. Jeremy, you mentioned that there was a game that costs $3.
Yes. So I played a game last night by Merlino Games, who is a developer from Mexico named, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of this name, so bear with me here, Antonio Freire. It's Freyre. So apologies, Antonio, if you hear this. But it comes in waves is I don't even know, an open world sort of third-person shooter desert scavenging game.
Okay.
But it is more sort of an experimental, like, it's a game that seems similar to other games that are very gamey. Like, it visually kind of reminds me of Star Wars Galaxies. The way it plays reminds me of sort of third-person shooters meets Knights of the Old Republic or something. It's got a lot of aesthetic notes that remind me of sort of more popcorny games. But this is, make no mistake, this is a game that is very clearly an intimate and personal piece by the developer. It is a game that does not show you its full hand, but it very much seems like a game that someone made while they were processing grief over losing somebody. And so you start out in this little town, and you're kind of like a dude wearing a black robe and kind of these like glowing goggles, very cool sci-fi dude. But you're in this little town that imagine like a miniature Mos Eisley, and there's a bunch of aliens and dudes walking around being weird. And everyone you talk to, in a normal kind of RPG like this, you go around and people give you quests, or they're like, "Oh, are you an adventurer? Do you need a laser sword?" In this, everyone's like, "I don't fuck with you, man. Everyone knows what you did, and we don't want you around. Leave." And every single NPC says something horrible to you about like, you know what you did. So your only choice is to leave on a little land speeder and go out into the world. And once you're into the world, the game actually reminds me more. It's funny you mentioned Iron Lung, because Iron Lung is probably the closest comparison for this game for me. The interface is very different. You're obviously third person, walking around. You can shoot, name down sites and stuff. But it's you have a map of this world. It doesn't trace your position on it. So it's essentially a similar thing to Iron Lung, where you're immersed in this world because you're constantly seeing something, and then you check the map and you're like, oh, there's a giant skull over there. That must be, giant skull on the map or whatever. But the gist of the game is essentially you're walking around and you have a backpack on with sort of like a weird looking high-tech backpack, and there's a meter that's going up that says specimen growth progress, and there is a gate somewhere to a temple a sanctuary you're trying to enter, and the only way you can get in is if the specimen is fully grown. So essentially the game tells you just go. There's even a shorter path to the end point, but you can't go there because the gate won't let you through. So the game kind of just invites you to go explore this world, and the world itself is very, very bleak and just kind of I would almost describe this as like an anti-game. A lot of places you go, the expectations you have for what that place will yield or what kind of experiences you'll have there are totally the opposite. You go and you expect to find NPCs giving you quests and stuff. Instead, you see 3 dudes shooting another guy, and you're like, I'm gonna save this guy, and then you save him, and then he just not grateful. He doesn't thank you. It's just sort of like, I don't know. It's just this hostile, oppressive, bleak world, and I kind of love it. I don't know. There's something about this game that, because it wasn't willing to satiate my need for gaminess,
Right.
I just felt totally immersed in this world and just so curious what it was trying to tell me. And I was trying to think of a name for this genre of like Iron Lung, and it comes in waves, and I think they're like vibe 'em ups. You just go around and you just immerse yourself in a mood. It's a mood piece. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
This is a game that's ostensibly about grief, and but it's not a game where it's like, oh, my friend just died and now I'm sad. It's a game that just immerses you in the feeling of grief in a bunch of different ways. And I kind of loved it. It's very short, so it's very short and experimental, but I thought it was great.
It looks neat. I'm very interested to play this. It's the look, like you said, it has like this sort of Star Wars, like Knights of the Old Republic kind of. I also got a vibe of just I don't know if it's the low poly, because it's not low poly, but it's like early aughts poly.
Yeah, like
Kinda
PS1-ish.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of Outcast. That
wow.
do you remember that French? Yeah, that Infogrames game.
I don't know that
Outcast is kind of a cult classic as well. Kind of a little bit like that. Like, I think that guy has a backpack too, maybe. So,
Oh, cool. This looks cool.
yeah, it's a bit like Journey as well.
Yeah.
Big tower.
Yeah, it is. The Journey is actually a good style comparison because it's sort of just about immersing yourself, and it's about your experience.
Also a mood piece.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not. Journey is never like, you are the prince of this land. You know what I mean? It just lets you go. And I don't know. I think that is it's a bold design choice to trust your players enough. I remember I follow the dev on Twitter, and when they released this game, they were posting about kind of tempering people's expectations for the game and essentially saying, this is an experimental game, don't go into this expecting a bombastic sci-fi adventure, go in just expecting kind of like a weird experimental mood piece. And I don't know. I think there's something funny to me about combining a very sort of popcorny sci-fi aesthetic with this type of a mood piece, because my brain kept expecting high adventure, and then I was met with just bleak desolation. And that the contrast, that brackish water between like going in, you go see the new Star Wars movie and the saddest French movie you've ever seen comes on screen, and you're like, am I in the right theater? Is this like, am I supposed to be here?
It'd be a fun one for crew. I'd like to. Because it's been out since April 5th, it says, so it's been almost a month. 125 user reviews, but very positive. So yeah, people seem to be into it. But yeah, it might be cool to get some more eyeballs on it. That's pretty.
Yeah, we should play it for crew. It's we could probably play the whole thing on crew in a video. It's very short.
Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? It's like if you do a crew video of Iron Lung, you just like complete Iron Lung.
Yeah, you just play Iron Lung.
Yeah. Cool beans. Nice one. It Comes in Waves is the name of that game. We had some people in the comments as well asking about making sure that when we refer to games that we put them explicitly in the description. So I've started doing that from a few weeks ago. Also, shout out to Jesse, who's been doing chapter markers as well. I started doing them a little bit ago, but they were a little bit loosey-goosey. He's been doing a great job because we had the chapter markers on YouTube, so we're putting them in the podcast as well. They might be slightly off because the edit on both of them, but the audio version and the video version are not identical because Jesse adds a bunch of audio flourishes to the non-YouTube version, but they'll be pretty close. So we're listening to that feedback. Frank, it says here Breath of the Wild. Have you been like sort of pre-gaming for Tears of the Kingdom here?
This feels like I am extremely late on turning in a homework project or something. I started Breath.
You said you didn't like it, right?
Yeah, well, okay, I played Genshin Impact. Okay, so my journey with Breath of the Wild.
Here we go.
My journey with Breath of the Wild
does butt jiggling come into it at some stage?
You know what? I finally made. Okay, I didn't know that Link gets the hot Gerudo girl outfit or whatever. Now Link actually looks pretty attractive. Now I'm into it.
There you
go.
go.
I didn't know. I put the game down right before he got to the Gerudo village with all these beautiful women. I'm like, this is awesome. This is so cool. my journey with Breath of the Wild was I was playing it in 2017, like all in. I had played like 3 Zelda games back to back, like Wind Waker, Ocarina of Time, Breath of the Wild. And in the middle of me playing Breath of the Wild, summer 2017, I went through like my first like breakup, like of a long relationship. And it was one of those things where I dropped everything. I dropped Breath of the Wild. I dropped Berserk. I forget what else I was into at the time, but it was like, oh, I just can't associate. And then I didn't play it until like 4 years later, and I started a save file with my friend Audrey. We started playing it. I changed the language to French. I thought it'd be cute, and then I kind of forgot about it. And I saw Tears of the Kingdom was coming out, and I'm like, oh, let me play this. I picked up the save file. I'm like, oh my god, now it's in French. Like, and like, and it's so weird. And it's like, you know what? I just need to beat this game. This feels like a game that's been cursed throughout all my relationships and everything. I just need to finish Breath of the Wild. At this point, I don't even care about Tears of the Kingdom. I just know once Tears of the Kingdom comes out, Breath of the Wild will be obsolete. So it's like, I just want to finish Breath of the Wild, but there's a turning point because like I tried it and I just couldn't click. Then I started playing Genshin Impact and I'm like, I like this, but this is just a ripoff of Breath of the Wild. But I played Genshin Impact for like a few weeks and then I hit the MMO wall where it's like, okay, I'm kind of just doing this out of habit, but I'm not enjoying it anymore. Let me try Breath of the Wild, and then it all clicked. And like I was so stingy with the weapons, but then I grinded Korok seeds, and now I can carry like 20 weapons. I got the Master Sword, which replenishes, and now I'm like, oh, this game is awesome. And then like I'm even playing it in bed on my Switch before going to bed, and I'm like, oh, okay, I like it. I and even doing puzzles is frustrating, but like I'm learning how to be patient and deal with it. And so yeah, I don't know. However many years later, I'm finally like, oh, Breath of the Wild is actually pretty good.
When is Tears of the Kingdom coming out?
Isn't it 15th?
So I think the 12th. So not like this Friday, like when the podcast comes out, but the next week. So, right? Yeah.
If Google auto-populates the initial release date for Tears of the Kingdom with February 21st, 1986.
Dude.
Which is probably the first Zelda game.
When is it next week? Is that what you said?
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
I
Next
got
Friday.
12.
I got confused because I was trying to look up this story because I went into a GameStop here in Waterford, in my hometown. I used to work at this one. It was in a different place, but I popped in because I was like, I'm always interested in whether or not there are consoles because every time I come back, the PS5 and Xbox Series X were still impossible to get. I could have walked away with one today, so they're back in stock, and that's pretty cool. But like GameStop is pulling out of Ireland. They're like closing all the stores because I went up and it was like closing down sale, and I was like, oh, that's crazy. This is like the only video game shop for like between here and I don't know, like 50 miles away at least in any direction. And I was like, oh, that's crazy. You guys closing down? And he was like, yeah, all of them are. All of GameStop Ireland is closing down. There's 35 stores. So
Whoa.
That's pretty crazy. So there might be like no video game shop in my hometown.
Do you think that like a local small used video game shop will open in the vacuum, or do you think Amazon has killed the possibility of that?
Yeah, well, it's funny because Amazon over here is like, I guess now is more of a thing. When I was living here, you couldn't get anything sent here, but that was like 10 years ago. And we passed a big Amazon thing in Dublin on the drive down this time, but I still think I don't know. Like when I was in the shop, and I used to work in the shop, so I remember what it was like. But when I was in the shop, some guy came in and like was asking a couple of questions about, have you heard if Midnight Suns is any good? Because I've just completed, what was the other Marvel game that came out recently? The Rocksteady one, was it, or who? I forget.
There was like
Remember
Suicide Squad. Was there?
Yeah, Suicide Squad. Maybe he played that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotham Knights. Sorry, that's what it was. Gotham Knights. And he was saying, and I remember that it was like, oh, this is a place where people get to come and talk about video games. So it has like a sort of a use in the like a very community orientated town, like Waterford. I used to work at an independent game shop in town called Games Dimension. Which you could argue got put out of business by the GameStop, which then I just went and worked at the GameStop like a good traitor. Yeah, I don't know. You guys want to move to Ireland and open a video game shop?
The question I had is like, are there any like, I don't know what you'd call them, like big store retailers, like the equivalent of like a Target or a Best Buy where they sell video games also, or is there just straight up no retail place to get video games?
Oh, actually, now you mention it, there's still this is something America doesn't have, which is a chain toy store.
Oh.
So there's one called Smith's, which I was in today, and it was just like like a Toys R Us, like
Okay,
a big
cool.
one, and they have a big video game set. They have not big, they have a video game section, which is decent enough. So yeah, you're right. That's probably, and I think you can just like at a Tesco, I think you can probably buy a PlayStation there while you're getting your groceries, but I'm not.
I feel
quite
like
sure.
Toys R Us is a weird place for adults to hang out and talk about video games, though.
Hey man,
My friends and I would go to Toys R Us because they would carry so many wrestling action figures. So,
Oh, cool.
so we would go look at all the wrestling toys, and they would even have like half-size Stone Cold and John Cena dolls, and we would like.
Oh, the ones that you can like power bomb,
Yeah,
like they always have the commercial where you're
Yeah.
power
Oh,
bombing a little
really?
Yeah.
half
that's
scale.
cool.
Toys R Us, honestly, like that's what my friends and I would do. We would walk around Toys R Us.
That's awesome.
But we'd go late at night.
Demo everything.
It was pretty fun. And then when I got to visit like when I visit Audrey in Montreal, like out of the city in the suburbs in Quebec, there was a Toys R Us, and that's where we would buy like Switch games.
Oh.
And they didn't, not surprisingly, not that many wrestling toys in Quebec, but in America, oh my God, Toys R Us were awesome.
They're not as violent up there.
Yeah,
I thought you were gonna say cultured.
yeah.
The deep culture. You have to reach
deep culture
It's like
of
Age of
wrestling.
Empires. You have to reach a certain level of culture
Yes.
for wrestling to unlock
Yes, exactly.
in any modern society.
It's way far down the tech tree.
Dude, I was in that Smith's today, just getting something for my kid, and they had just a huge. I was like, I wish I was into these wrestling figures because they just had like, there's so many of them now, and they have all the old guys too. They have like you can get like a couple of exceptions. You don't see a Chris Benoit.
No.
You don't see a. I never saw the video of Vince McMahon blowing his legs out.
Oh, yeah.
I was out drinking with some of my friends last night, and it came up, and I was like, I'd never seen that. There was obviously a problem with the fight. If what happened, it was somebody hurt themselves, and then
I think he.
or oh no, it was the Royal Rumble when they both hit the ground at the same
Yeah.
time. By accident, it was Batista and Cena, and then Vince McMahon runs down and jumps in the ring and blows both his like. The muscles above his legs out, and then does his whole. So he's going down, basically calling an audible to try and fix the whatever was going on, and then straight up like is like on the ground talking to them because he can't stand up.
Oh my God.
And then I saw they also showed it over Shane McMahon blew his legs out, and then Snoop Dogg saves it.
Yeah.
Just like comes in and. Yeah,
Which is funny because Shane McMahon has done the most dangerous spots in WWE history, like 20 feet
jumping
off
the Titantron.
Yeah. And for him to like, oh my God, Shane McMahon is back. He does a little hop and immediately blows his legs out, and it's like, damn, that sucks. Like
against the Miz,
That's
no one gets injured fighting the Miz. Man, I say I don't watch wrestling, but I have a lot of like wrestling. I guess if you hang out with all your friends who watch a lot of wrestling, you've watched a lot of wrestling, and I watched a lot during the Attitude Era, so I guess
it's ever present. What I like is my TikTok algorithm. It shows me a lot of wrestling clips. So like a match will happen, and then 3 hours later, it's like, oh, here's all the highlights. So it's getting around. And then even today, I bought wrestling tickets for the next LA show in June 17th
Cool.
at the Ukrainian Culture Center.
Nice.
Game
Is it
changer.
I told you it was culture. I told you.
Yeah.
It is. You're
Yes. Game changer
Ukrainians would know.
wrestler. Game changing wrestling is the promotion. And there's gonna be 2 Japanese wrestlers. Maki Ito will be there for the first time. Her gimmick is she's the cutest wrestler in the world. So she like straight up fights in like a J-pop idol, and she's like,
Oh my God.
"I'm Maki Ito, motherfucker!" Like she's so cute, and she's awesome. She's like, it's great.
I was watching. I was in my local bookshop today in town, and there was a Baby Metal was on the cover
Yes.
of Kerrang, which I thought was. I was like, someone's Baby Metal used to be like this sort of side, this like I don't know side gag of the metal scene, and now they are one of the few bands keeping the scene alive, and they're all grown up and stuff. Yeah, it's weird stuff. Couple more games here. Speaking of, I guess, Japanese things, what is Boku no Natsuyasumi? Is that right?
So Boku no Natsuyasumi is a game. It's Japanese for my summer holiday, my summer vacation.
Oh, this game. Yes, I remember the video that
Tim Rogers.
Tim
Action
Rogers
Button.
was
Yeah,
it?
exactly. So that's the video that put it on my radar. I started watching that video when it came out, and and I kind of was like, oh, I want to play this game. I want to watch the video, but I want to kind of have my own experience with this game. But it's not translated into English. there is a fan translation underway for it, but so like a year ago I started toying around with learning Japanese just for fun.
Right.
And did it for, a few weeks, and then kind of, as you do, as one does when they're learning Duolingo, it's like, oh, I'm going to learn Japanese. And then 3 weeks later, it's like, I don't know about this. So I got back into it maybe a week ago, and I figured, it's fun. It's like a fun pastime. Japan is like the only place internationally we've been for work that I would pay my way back to gladly in a heartbeat. It was just one of the coolest places I've ever been in my life. And the one night we went out with someone who is a fluent conversational Japanese speaker was the best night there,
it was
bar
amazing.
none.
Yes.
So I don't know. I've never committed to learning a foreign language except in high school when I had to for school. I thought it'd be like a fun little thing, so I picked up Japanese again, and I figured having something to kind of center that, because I don't have any Japanese friends, and I don't have any friends who speak. Frank, do you speak Japanese?
No, I do not.
Okay, cool. I hadn't asked you yet. You're like the only person who I may say yes to that question. So I figured Boku no would be a good way to kind of like learn Japanese and then check in with just fire up the game in Japanese and kind of play the first 5 minutes a bunch of times and see how much I could pick up. And it's funny because the thing that people say is hard about learning Japanese is there's 2,500 kanji characters that you have to learn by the time you're out of elementary school. So I've got the hiragana and katakana alphabets down, the like two normal alphabets, so I can sound out a lot of words, which is cool. So like kamera is like camera, and there's a lot of like loan words, or like America, it's like America.
Yes. Yeah. Irish has those too.
But I've started learning a little bit of the kanji because there's a feature in Google Translate where we use Google Translate a bunch when we were in Japan, and with mixed results.
Yeah,
exactly. But there's a mode that I just found on it where you can turn off the auto translate and it just shows you all the characters, and you can click and drag over each character. So you can click and drag over a kanji character and paste it into Google and learn about the individual characters. And for whatever reason, having this game I've played the first 5 minutes like 6 times or whatever, but having I don't know, there's something, it's like, maybe it's just because it's video games and I love video games, but it makes it more exciting to learn Japanese because every time I fire it up, I'll recognize the character for house and the kanji for name, and I'll be like, oh, he's saying the name of our house is whatever, Serrano. And I was like, I don't know what Serrano means, but I know, so then I'll translate it on Google. It'll be like, the name of our house, this house's name is Serrano. And I don't know, it's very satisfying. It's
That's
like
cool.
Yeah.
Is there an element of, and I guess this is the opportunity to explain what Boku no is.
Oh,
Is there an element of the thematic, I guess, is there an element of the game's themes that also kind of works in that, like, the old story of like a child going away to a foreign country where they don't know what anyone's saying, and then by the time they've left the summer vacation in France, they're fluent in French. You know what I mean? Is there an element of that going on? And just kind of explain what the game is.
That's a really good point, because I'm like the child in this story, that's actually so thematically appropriate, because the game's name is Boku no Natsuyasumi, which means my summer vacation. But so Boku is I, but so Boku no means like mine, I have or whatever. So because you can also say watashi wa for I am. But Boku is also the kid's name. So the whole I think, unless I am mistaken, which is extremely possible, I think the game is doing his name is I, so everything that he says is you, it's your experience that you're saying it, which is cute. But yeah, no, there's definitely, it's this very sort of wholesome childlike interaction between him and his relatives. So I think that actually does help, because they're not talking about quantum physics or anything. They're like, oh, it's nice. It's nice being in nature. And I'm like, oh, cool. Now I know how to say nature. But yeah, so it's basically a game, takes place in the 1970s in Japan. And I guess this is a common thing for a lot of people growing up, at least in that period in Japan, where your family would live in a more urban area, but then you would go out and visit relatives in the country to kind of get a different taste of, different culture and different speed of life and stuff. So yeah, I feel like I'm Boku. I feel like I'm going on a vacation. It's just I'm going to relive the first day of that vacation for the next year until I can understand what's going on.
I love the idea that you then like go to Japan and you go in a city and you have like no vocabulary for urban life.
Yeah, I'm like, so what do you guys grow, like broccoli around here? Like, no, what are you talking about, dude? Yeah, it is fun though, because even though I can't read everything fluently, which I think will take a very long time, just playing through the first little section over and over, there's one section where you're talking to someone and there's 3 options on the screen, and I had no idea what they were asking me, but I sounded out the syllables for each thing, and it was like kare raisu, and I was like, oh, that's curry, that's the curry rice, or like curry and rice, and then one was chicken katsu, and I was like, I know chicken katsu. So yeah, I don't know, it's fun. It's given me a little bit of structure to learning Japanese, and I don't know, there's a lot of games that are untranslated that I would like to play. So yeah, maybe in like a year or two I'll do crew videos where I play games that no one can read except Japanese speakers.
That's dope. I know it came out. It was because it came out originally in 2000. Then they did a PSP version, I guess, as well in Japan. Are you able? You playing this PlayStation version emulated, or how does it work?
Yeah, I'm playing the PS1 version emulated.
Awesome.
Yeah, Google Translate has been pretty successful as far as I can tell on translating it. I think you probably could play the whole game with Google Translate and not, I'm sure you would miss a lot of nuance. I'm sure someone would tell you something very sincere and emotional, and you'd be like, oh, they're telling me that the river is fast, and just like miss everything. But it's cool. Yeah, I don't know. It's having something to sort of, it's like a mirror for progress as I learn to read and understand Japanese versus just doing Duolingo ad nauseum,
Yeah, I like it, and it reflects in a way your life in Sonoma, living in the non-urban woods. Why in the notes here does it say eating Szechuan peppercorns? Is that
Okay.
something you've been doing out in your backyard?
This
with
is
deer?
totally separate from Boku no, but it's as good a time as ever. What do you guys know about Szechuan peppercorns? Anything?
I know nothing.
Okay, so have you
I
guys
know
ever
what
had...
both those words mean.
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
do not know. Like, are you dipping peppercorn in Szechuan sauce? Like, what's going on?
It sounds like a corn nuts flavor.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Okay, so
one of the less popular ones.
So Szechuan peppercorns aren't even really peppercorns. They're like seed husks or flour husks or something, but they're a popular Szechuan. So I grew up on the east coast of America, where most of the Chinese takeout is Szechuan, rather than a lot of the takeout on the west coast is Cantonese, as far as I can gather. So their Szechuan cooking uses an ingredient called Szechuan peppercorns, and they're spicy, but they have a different chemical in them than capsaicin or whatever it is. When you eat a hot pepper and it's spicy, like that sensation. It's like something Sansahul. I can't. It's like a weird chemical name, but it has a chemical that stimulates your mouth in a way where people refer to it as cold heat or numbing heat. So if you've ever eaten something like mapo tofu, it numbs your lips and mouth a little bit. It's a very distinct sensation.
Wasabi? Would that be like that too, or not?
No, definitely a different type of spice, but I don't think wasabi is the same numbing heat. But it's so odd. So I got Szechuan peppercorns to try and cook for myself, because I every time I get Szechuan food, like I found a Szechuan place finally in Sonoma and ordered it, and it was, my whole house smelled like the Chinese food I ate as growing up.
Oh,
so
that's awesome.
I was like, I need to get high on my own supply. I need to figure out how to do this. And so I got Szechuan peppercorns yesterday, and there's a few different ways to use them, but one of them is you infuse the oil and then just leave the whole peppercorns in there. And the description I was reading it, they were like, yeah, it's like the texture turns some people off. It's kind of gritty, but I was like, fuck it. I'm like an authentic Chinese chef now. So I bite into a whole Szechuan peppercorn, and half of my mouth immediately goes numb. And when I say numb, I don't mean like it's spicy. I mean like it felt like someone shot Novocaine into my mouth.
Like you went to the dentist, and
it felt like I was it freaked me out a little bit, because most people don't eat them whole.
Yeah, you're like, am I having a stroke? Because
I thought it was, am I dying?
Yeah.
Is my throat gonna like close up because it doesn't know how to like work? So not only does it numb your mouth, but it also, I sent it to, my friend is a neuroscientist in Boston. So I was talking to him about this yesterday. I sent him the Wikipedia for the chemical, and he was kind of explaining why it's unique to me. And essentially, if I'm remembering correctly, I am not a neuroscientist. It stimulates like fine motor touch nerves in your mouth. So essentially, like the way I can best understand it is, if you touch something with your fingertips that has texture, you can feel it much more acutely and with higher fidelity than like if it rubs against your chest or whatever. So I think it's firing up like those type of sensory sensations in your mouth. So the only way I could describe it is that it felt like it felt like I could feel every pore of the inside of my mouth while it was also numb. It was so strange.
Oh my god!
But they taste really good.
Dude, and how long did it last?
Like 2 or 3 minutes.
Wow.
It was really cool. Yeah.
I wonder if this is something that, like, do we have any listeners who grew up in a household that like made a lot of Szechuan food or grew up in that part of China or something? But like, I wonder if this is something they all know. They're like, yeah, oh yeah, that's like a thing.
Oh,
Whereas
yeah.
to us, we're like, what is this?
So I posted about it on Twitter because it blew my mind, and a couple people responded with interesting anecdotes. One guy is a dude who lives in Tokyo and said he went to a Szechuan restaurant near him, and they had a separate, you go to a place and they're like, how spicy do you want it? You like 1, 2, 3 peppers spicy. They had 2 scales for spicy. One was spicy and one was numbing.
Oh my god!
So you can tell them how numb you want to be when you're eating this.
How numb you want to be, man?
Yeah, how numb you want to be.
I don't want to feel a thing.
I've become so numb.
Exactly. I'm turning the lights on here because it's 10 past 9 here, and the moon is bright in the sky. Let me see if I can show you guys.
Yeah, let's get the shot. We'll describe it for the audio listeners.
Whoa.
Oh yeah, look at that.
It's sunset here is pretty late. I was out last night at a bar and I could still see some sunlight at like almost 10 o'clock, like 9:50 or so. So in the summertime, it's pretty great because by 11 o'clock you can still get a whisper of sunset, which is pretty nice. So we're not quite there yet, but it's a nice old day. That's nice. How did the actual Szechuan food go? What did you make?
Oh, it turned out so good. I made like a stir fry with. I also bought dried chilies. I think they're bird chilies or whatever. I wanted to get. There's like facing heaven chilies, which are the ones I wanted, but I couldn't find them. But I got those, and I made like a little like bok choy and broccoli little stir fry with garlic, ginger, scallion. The whole cast of characters was there. It's unbelievably good. I've been learning to cook better, and it's been a life-changing experience.
You're just having a real Boku no lifestyle over there. It's just like
learning Japanese. I'm learning to cook Chinese authentic Szechuan food. Yeah, it's a real renaissance over here.
Excellent. That's a podcast, I think, folks. We got a bunch of projects going on. The Age of Empires documentary went up yesterday. I had a meeting with Frank on Monday, and then he was like, "When's that doc going up?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I forgot. I need to put that up." But I keep having, I'm trying to spend time with family and stuff. So I was minding my kid in like a indoor, like those indoor play places where it's just like a bunch of ball pits and pens. And it's like a big 3-story high like thing you can explore and shit. She was in one of those, and I was just kind of sitting down bored, and I was like, I'll set it live now, and I just did it on my phone on like YouTube on YouTube Studio. The night before, I had to read just kind of give some TLC to the subtitles. So yeah, that was pretty cool. So it's great. Yeah, people seem to be into it. I think we're just over 24 hours up now, and it has 110,000 views, which is cool.
Oh, wow.
Lots of folks talking about it in the Age of Empires community. Some of them how it's interesting how like some people haven't played AoE since it came back. Some people were playing since the HD version came back and are like, that's when the real sort of comeback came. And then some people are like, would like more about esports inside of it. It is interesting. I think like we haven't negated doing something bigger on Age of Empires, but this one was very much about this sort of moment in time with these 3 definitive editions. Because we don't even talk about Age of Empires 4 at all in this one.
I feel like the ultimate Age of Empires documentary would have to be a Ken Burns type thing that also gave historical context to what all of these tribes were, the histories were, like where they got like because that's the stuff I want to know about. That sounds cool.
Yeah, let's fire our own trebuchet.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be so good. That's like the midpoint break in the doc, Like it starts with the very historical stuff, and then at some point it cuts to us in a field somewhere in England firing a trebuchet, and that's when it transitions into talking about video
pay
games.
A monk to say wololo.
Yes.
Yeah,
Like, just
exactly.
Go whole hog on it. But yeah, go check that out. It's it's a short enough video. It's like 30 minutes. It's one we kind of did in between projects. But we're happy to do something on AoE because we've been threatening to do something on AoE forever. Awesome work by Jesse on the edit of that one. I just like trimmed it up a little bit. The same is happening on the Choo Choo one that you did, which I'm working on a little bit here, but I'll probably won't get it. It won't be up until I come back because I have to record stand-ups for that one. There's a video on Noclip Crew about Redfall. We talked a bunch about it today, but you get to see it in action. We're also going to do the Burger King documentary. The games on the we said if that video on Crew gets 2,000 likes, we'll do it. It got 2,000 likes. I have my first interview for that project the day this podcast goes up. So I'm on vacation doing interviews with people about that doc already. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Frank, go ahead and capture all that gameplay.
I'm so excited.
Immortality, of course, if you're a patron, you can go check out the awesome behind the scenes video Frank put up. People really enjoyed that behind the scenes video, Frank. Nice work. We're going to do more of that stuff. We also have an Age of Empires Let's Play that myself and Frank did that's going to go up for patrons only as well. We're putting a lot of work into some behind the scenes and patrons only stuff, and the reason behind that will become apparent in a couple of weeks. We're going to have a bit of an announcement about our Patreon. We also dipped down under 4,000 patrons for the first time since the month after we started, I think. So we're overdue a funding push over here for sure. But we have, between the tapes and our big thing we're doing in a couple of weeks, I'm hoping we'll get some of that. We have a lot of exciting projects going on in the background we can't tell you about. One that I was trying to make happen forever, and we almost made it happen last year, and then it looks like it's back on, so I'm excited to do that. A bunch of ones I'd love to be able to talk about, but we just can't possibly. But I think this summer is going to be like our best time ever for recording docs, it looks like. And it's all stuff that's like we're kind of moving away from the big studio stuff, more retrospectives on older games, more fan favorites, I'd say, and also stuff that's not game studios for the first time, which I'm very excited about. Some kind of game history stuff that's not necessarily about the developers, but about other things like websites and entertainers and things like that. Be as vague as possible. So thank you all, everyone who's been supporting us. I think it feels like creatively we're in an amazing place, and there's going to be a lot of cool stuff coming out in the next couple of months, and we're definitely going to be sharing a lot of that stuff with the Patreon people. So if you would like to support this podcast, fund our docs, and get access to bonus episodes and loads more over on the official Discord as well, you can do so at patreon.com/noclip. We didn't get to talk about it. I think I talked about it a little bit privately with my good friend Rob Zachney, because we recorded Shift F1 yesterday, and I obviously have do a podcast with Rob now for years. We didn't get to talk about Waypoint and what happened over there, but obviously at the moment, not an amazing time for games websites writ large. Everyone's kind of in a weird spot. It seems like IGN, I don't know, IGN maybe seems to be doing decent enough. I assume they're always doing well, but also maybe they're downsized a bit. I'm not sure. GameSpot, I know, they announced a whole suite of shows this week over at Fandom, but I know they're operating on a skeleton crew. Obviously, we've talked about Giant Bomb a lot over these parts. It looks like, Waypoint was getting closed by Vice. So yeah, just a massive thank you to everyone who allows us to do what we do. We're not planning on going anywhere. We're certainly not planning on corporate ownership anytime soon. Never had it on the docket at any stage, but certainly at this point, you can, it was funny. Me and Frank were talking about this last week, where completely legitimately, I feel like there was Frank made a really good point of, there was this sort of, people were getting sick of Patreon a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, everyone's got a Patreon. Lots of people in the games industry world kind of disappeared into Patreon for a while. I feel like the past 3 or 4 months, and Frank was making this point, now you know why, because the only people who are left standing are the ones who are independent. Like, it really looks that way, and that's super sad. But obviously, we're very fortunate to be on this side. So thank you all so much, and we're working hard to also have other ways to support ourselves and support the business, so we're not just on the Patreon side of thing. Our talks with publishers on Stunt Derby have been going very well, and we're hoping to get something on that, which would be great. we're working on some other stuff in the background as well to help ourselves out. But obviously, none of this would be possible without you. So thank you all so much. Frank, what are you doing with the rest of your week?
Well, at some point, I'll be eager to jump into Pocket Bike Racer, Burger King games. Lots of manga, comic books. I need to get as much sun as possible, so I still need to hike.
What's the weather like down there at the moment?
It's right now. It's 61 degrees, but that's like pretty good. No, the weather, we've escaped the eternal winter. Like it was raining every other week. It was kind of crazy. So now the weather's pretty nice. And then free comic book day is this Saturday. So every shop will have free comics discounts. Go check it out.
If you're in San Diego, go check out our friends at Now or Never Comics.
Yes.
Jeremy, what about you?
Oh man, I'm kind of getting into the depths of the Immortality edit, and which is fun. It's a very big project, and I really want to do it justice. So I'm trying to approach it with a very clear mind. But the color grade is done on it, and I've kind of started editing it. And the footage it's so fun to edit or to color grade footage that's not in a conference room or like a BAFTA under fluorescent lights. It's nice to we've had no shortage of angles in this place, so it's like. It's an embarrassment of riches. It's a nice change of pace.
Nice one. Yeah, I'm mostly hanging out with family and stuff. Haven't had a chance to play many games except with my nephew. What were we playing? Spelunky, but he had like zero patience because he's like 8 or 9 years old, so he's just like constantly whipping me and just throwing bombs in my face by accident. I'm not sure. But it was a lot of fun. And just watch him play Need for Speed Rivals over and over again. So. It was a real good time.
Hope you have a nice time, man. I hope you. I know you're a very hardworking dude, but I hope you take some time for chilling and family.
Appreciate
stuff,
it, man. Yeah, it's nice to catch up with you guys. We may be. I don't know what the deal is next week. I might be otherwise indisposed or not. And then also, I want to mention as well that we've had the Patreon exclusive podcasts for a while, and they have been. Like fine, but like I always feel weird a little bit about like the public podcast being this little teaser thing. I think what we're moving towards, because Jesse had an amazing idea for a podcast series, and I think what we're going to do, and I don't want to promise anything, but what I think is probably maybe going to happen is that we'll just keep this podcast being all the episodes are public, but we're going to do a premium podcast, like an edited, researched, podcast. And have that for patrons only, and maybe we'll put the first episode up on this feed or something like that, and then the rest of them will be for patrons only. So we're kind of changing how we do the Patreon stuff a lot, like because everyone's talents are working on everything, not just the stuff on the main channel or crew, but also on the Patreon side too. So just a lot of stuff happening. We'll have announcements soon over the next couple of weeks, but we got some fun. He pitched a project that was like, the minute the words came out of his mouth, I was like, yes, we are doing that. That sounds exactly what I want to do. That type of podcast. Let's talk about all those games. I'll talk about those for hours. So it should be a lot of fun. Awesome. That's a podcast, folks. Thanks so much to Jesse for editing the stuff and getting it up. He's doing the video version as well. And thanks to you all for supporting our work. And we'll see you next time. Bye.